Welcome to Retro Tech 100. I'm Kieran. I've been seeing a lot of videos now on stuff we used to watch in the 80s and 90s and games we used to play, and I thought I'd do my own video. If you'd like to respond to this, go right ahead. I was born in 1979, so I remember a lot of programs from the early 80s to mid 90s. By about 10 years old, I kind of stopped watching cartoons, but I'd still watch the teen dramas and kind of the stuff like Grange Hill in that kind of age bracket. And one of my favourite shows, even though it wasn't really aimed at children but the family, was Treasure Hunt. I think it started in 1982. And the idea is it was a treasure hunt on a grand scale. There was two contestants in the studio, as it were. They had a host who would help them. They were given clues by some other woman. I can't remember what her name was. She would give the clues. She knew the answers to these clues, but she wouldn't tell them. So they'd look at all these books and run about in this kind of like fake library. They'd look at these books and send Annika Rice across the country to different places to find, in the real world, to find stuff, to find more clues to keep going, and they'd win like £1,000 if they won at the end. Every time they got a clue, that I think they'd win like £50 or £100, which was quite a lot in the early 80s. It was really like back in the early 80s. It was amazing they could do this. She carried a big old pack for her microphone. She had a big old microphone on her head, and the cameraman would follow her around. I still really don't know how they did it. I guess they did it by phone, and then by the time they cut the program together, it looked like they were talking to her directly, but they couldn't see anything she was doing, which was kind of weird. But it did work on the show. You didn't really think about it. They couldn't see stuff, but you could see everything that was going on. Annika Rice would run up and down. She'd flirt terribly. I was watching it last night to just kind of refresh myself, and she'd flirt with everybody. It was brilliant. She managed to get a lift from a policeman. She'd get people to help her do all sorts of stuff. And they wouldn't show it now, but she was flirting terribly all over the place. I didn't realise that as a kid. I just really liked the fantastical nature of her jumping on a helicopter, flying around and getting out all these places and following clues. Half the time they never got to the end, but when they did, it was really cool. It was a great show, and there's loads of it still on YouTube, so if you want to watch it, go on YouTube and watch it. You might not have been old enough to see it. Treasure Hunt. The second show will go straight into the early 90s was Games Master. Now everybody knows Games Master, hosted by Dominic Diamond. The first series was set in a church. The second series was set in an oil rig. The first and second series are my favourite, and they had some other bloke, I can't remember his name now. I did remember earlier, but I've forgotten now anyway. Obviously, everybody loves Games Master. You'd see games on there that you'd never seen before. Obviously, they'd do reviews, and I had cheats. And you'd ask Games Master, Games Master, can you help me with Sega Super Mario Brothers 3? And he'd no idea what he's doing, obviously. And here's a fact for you. Dominic Diamond only ever met Sir Patrick Moore once. It was the very last episode of the very last series. They were passing in the hallway and had a little chat. And isn't it funny that they only met once, but I guess Patrick Moore used to turn up doing his lines and go home and didn't really probably know what was going on, even though he was a very smart fella. Games Master. I wish they'd bring it back, but if they did, it'd probably be terrible. So best left in the annals for us to watch it on YouTube and reminisce about all the great games, all the great contestants they had on there, like John Fashanu, Finney Jones. I think they had a few page 3 models on there and all. And all the games we'd never seen before that got premiered on that show. What a great show, Games Master. The next show I fondly remember, from the opening credits to when it stopped, was Nightmare. When you first saw the intro cartoon to that, it certainly sparked interest. So the premise for Nightmare was that you'd have a team of 4, you'd have 1 dungeoneer and 3 advisors. They were aged between 11 and 16, and you'd have to traverse these dungeons. The dungeon master, Treyguard, would help you. And he was supposed to be agnostic, but in the later series he kind of definitely leaned on the side of helping the dungeoneer and the advisors, the guy who ran everything. I think it was based on the Saxon Knight. He'd the only one that had gone through all these dungeons. The advisor would have to wear a helmet to cover their eyes, and they could only see what was right below them. So he was blind walking into these dungeons, and his advisors, his teammates, were his eyes and ears there, and they had to actually tell him where to go, walk forward, turn left, turn right, to avoid obstacles and not get killed and try and get through the dungeon. He'd have a knapsack that he'd put food in, because if he didn't put food in, you'd die. And he could carry objects that he found when he traversed through the dungeons or rooms. What really struck it for me, in the early 80s, I'd seen nothing like this. I don't think anybody had. They mixed CGI with hand-drawn sets, and it looked really amazing, like a real-life computer game. And I think that's what everybody probably got from it, being my age and from that era, it was like a computer game, but it was a TV show. And the great medieval setting, and the monsters, and the people that help you along the way through the dungeons really racked up the excitement. And it was a nail-biting stuff. You don't know if they were going to die, if they got through to the next dungeon or room. Otherwise, a big lad, I wasn't scared of nothing. But it was nail-biting stuff when you were watching to see if they get to the next room or if the dungeoneer get killed off. And what I also liked about it was, if a dungeoneer get killed off, they'd bring the next 4 in straight away. There wasn't like they didn't time it so that they died at the end of the episode. If there was like halfway through the episode, they'd bring in 4 more new ones. So you didn't really know if these were going to make it or not, depending on what time it was. You know, if it started at 4:30 and it was getting a bit hairy and it was nearly 5 o'clock, you didn't think it was, oh, they were going to die. You really didn't know from one room to the next if they were gonna. Some of them were terrible. Some of them were really like shouting at each other, arguing with each other, and others were really good and really quite clever kids. Some were really dumb and some were really clever, and you could see the ones who'd make it to the end and who were straightforward with it, and who wouldn't. And obviously, as the series went on, the language of the kids changed, so they knew how to speak to each other to get through the levels. You know, left, walk forward, take a left. And the dungeoneer would know, because obviously he'd watched 3 or 4 of these series ahead of time. Like with the first series, I guess the kids didn't really know what they were doing, and you could see that they used to die quicker. But as the series progressed, these children had watched the previous series and understood, what to do, when to do it, how to move, and how to communicate with the dungeoneer. And it was brilliant. And I know they brought back 1 episode in 2013 for YouTube, using Ashens and his friends, and it was good. And it's a shame they didn't carry it on, because I would have liked to see a full-blown series. And they brought Traeger back, which was really cool. So go and check out on YouTube. Another one of my favourites, and one that my daughter watches, but she won't watch the new one. She'll only watch the original ones, was the Crystal Maze. We don't like the ones with that other guy. We don't like the ones with Richard Ayoade, although they're not bad. The proper ones, the first 3 series with Richard O'Brien. The only ones really that you should watch are brilliant. So the premise is, if you don't know already, there's a labyrinth of 4 different zones, and you'd have to do challenges with your teammates, find crystals that equal time in the Crystal Dome to win a prize. Normally the prize was pretty shit, but had the futuristic zone or future zone, medieval zone. They changed them over the years. There was an underwater zone, there was an industrial zone, but definitely the best bit of the show was Richard O'Brien. He'd really funny, kind of sarcastic all the time to the contestants. And he made the programme, and when the new guy started, it just wasn't the same, and I never watched it afterwards. I watched a couple of the Richard Ayoade ones, but not all of them. I'll go back and always watch the Crystal Maze, the original ones with Richard O'Brien. So you'd have a time limit on the doors, and if you didn't do the puzzle or you got yourself locked in by making mistakes, you'd get locked in there, and they'd have to get them out using a crystal that they've won in previous games. And it was funny to see ones that would get the people out and ones that would just leave them there to rot. It was really funny. They go back, they'd pull their crystals, and I think each one was 5 seconds. Try and get all the gold little packets that were inside the Crystal Dome when all the wind was blowing. I'm not making this make much sense of this, but you've all seen the Crystal Maze. If they got silver, they couldn't win a prize. Normally the prize was like a trip to Centre Parks or something. It wasn't amazing, or flying lessons. Something like that. Something like, it wasn't money, but it was like it reminds me of those like management team building things, but way better. And I love the series with Rich O'Brien. The rest can just get lost for all I care. Now, who could forget Gladiators? It was 1992. John Fashanu and Erika Johnson hosted this David versus Goliath kind of Saturday night TV show where the gladiators would try and pound a normal member of the public into submission. You'd have different games. Obviously, you know Gladiators. If you're my age, you know it. You'd have different obstacles to get through. Normally, it's PE teachers would go on, people who run gyms, and they'd try and beat the gladiators. Some of them got pounded terribly. Others ended up doing really well and became gladiators. Obviously, my favourite gladiator was Jet, because she was gorgeous, and Wolf. Love Wolf. We had Phoenix, Laser, Panther. A lot of them towards the end of the series that dropped off, probably did a load of drugs and died. But some of them survived. So they had to do certain games. It was in these big metal balls. I can't remember the names of the different games that they used to have. One on an upside down racetrack, one that had to climb up a wall and be chased by a gladiator. And at the end, they had to do an assault course, jump through a piece of paper, and that person was the winner. I think they'd go to quarterfinals and semi-finals I don't know what they win, but I can't say I never noticed what they won. But it was great just to see these gladiators come out and beat the shit out of these people. It was hilarious. Obviously, you'd always back the contestant and wanting to win, do against these, do well against these, major athletes. Rhino, I mean, the size of Rhino against like a normal human, you think, oh, he's never going to beat him. And when he used to beat him, it used to be great. It was great fun. It was a great show. I think it ran a long time. They tried to do a reboot. I don't really think it worked. But the original were the best. Gladiators. If you're not seeing Gladiators, maybe you're 20-something and you don't remember Gladiators, go back and watch it. They're all on YouTube, just to rake about. If you'd like to do a response video to this, go right ahead. I'd love to see what your favourite programmes of the 80s and 90s were. Obviously, I never had no cartoons on this one, because I think cartoons being covered by others. I really enjoyed these kind of shows, these challenge type shows where you pit people against, either a dungeon or a hulking great mass of an athlete. Stuff like that, I really used to love it. And don't forget Richard O'Brien. This has been RetroTech 100. I'll see you next time.